So our task now is to talk about gaps as we see them in terms of brain health research in Europe. And we're asked to give a very brief presentation each, so 5 minutes each. So this will not take much time. So my name is Thilo van Eimeren. I'm from Cologne, and the reason why I'm here, I guess, is because of these projects up there, an EBRA project, European Cluster for Imaging Biomarkers, and 2 JPND projects. And so what I thought I'll bring to this table is actually 3 drivers for brain health that I think are important, where we need to bridge gaps. Molecular imaging, open science, and AI, artificial intelligence, that's already been talked about. So my first question to you is, do you think that we can understand the story of a movie by just looking at the end of the movie? And probably you will agree that it's impossible to guess what happened before if you just look at the still in the end or just the last scene. But exactly that's what we do if we look at histopathology post-mortem, right? So we have a very good understanding what Alzheimer's disease looks like at the end stage and end of life. But really what we need is a more vital image of what happened in between, and for that we need in vivo information, in vivo molecular information. So for most of these age-related diseases, but most other diseases as well, we think that there's a crossroad at some point where the pathology starts and then there's a development. So we need in vivo molecular information, and that's, I think, the biggest message that I have today for understanding these important trajectories and mechanisms. And this is just an example where molecular PET imaging has really transformed a whole field, and this is Alzheimer's disease, where we now have a definition, a biological definition through biomarkers, where PET imaging is important. PET imaging has also transformed clinical trials, where it has been a surrogate endpoint for clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease. So this is just one example where molecular information of the brain has really transformed lives. But it's a very costly and very complicated process, and this is just showing all the steps that are happening before we can actually talk of a successful radio tracer, and all of this is further complicated by regulation. And the regulation in this area really needs reform, and that's something I'd really like to see happening in Europe, and also platforms maybe that arise and increase the chance that we in Europe are at the forefront of developing radio tracers that are used in that case. Now, AI and brain health, I think that this is a very important topic where we, in the end, want to use AI in individual cases, but there are certain blocks. So there are roadblocks, for example, for open science. So we have available data, but it's not available as big data. For that, we need data sharing, and open science is all about sharing, but we have certain roadblocks. And of course, we need to translate those into really applicable AI mechanisms, and there are quality issues that I think are in place. These are 2 examples. This is from the EBRA consortium, where we talked about how sharing brain imaging data works in the open science era, and specifically how to share brain imaging and also why. And just to highlight the legal and motivational aspects, which I think are the most important of this. And we said that the administrative and legal burden is too high to share data, that sharing data is currently too time-consuming. There's insufficient dedicated funding for data sharing, and specifically we need there's a motivational issue, and we discuss in this paper that there's currently missing proper recognition for the act of data sharing per se. In a scientific context. So our proposition and request to policymakers there was that there should be a GDPR manual, like a standardization of how to address GDPR issues. There should be specific funding for data sharing and data management. And data sharing itself needs to be recognized as a scientific contribution. right? Because we currently don't do that unless you are a part of the author team of a paper. But the sharing itself is not really dedicated as a scientific contribution. Now, this one example where AI creates a problem. So Houston, we have a AI problem. So this is a recent publication that we did as the neuroimaging study group of the International Movement Disorder Society. This is work by Verena and Elena. Very quickly, just to show you that we had a set of minimal quality criteria that we apply for AI use in neuroimaging in Parkinsonian disorders. And what you see here is the red curve is the studies surpassing or passing all minimal quality criteria. And you can see that there was a little bit of a rise, and then it plummets. So it's really down to the extreme increase of papers that you see the relative percentage of good papers decline. So this is really a problem also for editors and journals that we need to fix. I think that we need, in the end, minimal quality standards for AI. So my question to you, maybe for the discussion, is how can you help with these drivers of brain health, the development of novel PET traces, harmonized GDPR approaches, specific incentives for data sharing, and minimal quality standards for AI. Thank you.
More or less. So I need to do that. Let's see. Okay, we see this one. All right, I'm Niklas Marklund, professor of neurosurgery in Lund. I was actually in the previous session as well. So I will have a brief introduction of one knowledge gap that I think we have in a particular area. As I told you last session, I work on traumatic brain injury, named the most complex disease known to man in the most complex organ in the body. As a neurosurgeon, I work a lot with the very severe ones. We do surgeries and we put all these monitors in the brain. I also do some basic science on traumatic brain injury. But what I choose for this sort of knowledge gap is something that would be perfect for European collaboration. And what I think is interesting to most of us is sports concussion. It's what you define as a mild traumatic brain injury. The question is, how mild is it really? So, because millions of athletes, youngsters, even recreational professionals, are at risk of attaining a concussion, a head impact during sports. Not least in football, but of course rugby, boxing, shouldn't even mention boxing, handball, equestrian sport, etc. So how it starts, typically the start of a concussion is rapid head rotation, causing, you can imagine, a dynamic stretch of the axons and the white matter. But how it goes, recovery, well, most recover 2 to 10 days. Normal is considered 4 weeks of symptoms, but an increasing number getting prolonged symptoms, the persistent post-concussive symptoms. And why is that? We simply don't really know that. And this is a cohort that we had. This is 22 different symptoms. You can use as an assessment form. The darker it is, the more symptoms they have. They have normal routine neuroimaging, but they have all of these symptoms basically, and quite severe degree. So they truly have an impaired brain health following a concussion in sports, and they are young, mid-20s. We also know nowadays it's increased dementia risk in professional athletes. A lot of recognized in the UK, 7,000 professional previous football players had a 5-time increased risk of dementia, increased risk of Parkinson, increased risk of ALS, even motor neuron disease. So the debate, football need to change. What can we do about it? And also, if we go to the US, the huge discussion to have of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. You can see the movie if you like to waste a few hours. I don't really like that movie, but it's another story. So some of these athletes, when they die, they have aggregation of phosphorylated tau, one of the dementia proteins, irregularly at the depth of cortical sulci. I can spend an hour discussing pros and cons about this, but it's a fear and a concern that you might get this from sports. So how should athletes be evaluated? We don't really know. A lot of development in biomarkers, refined neuroimaging. This is our 7 Tesla MRI that we have in Lund. Different sensors to actually measure the rotational impact that you have during a sport activity. It's all in rapid development. And also at least the majority of studies say the females fare much worse. What is the cause of that? We don't really know. But on the other hand, only one female thus far has been diagnosed with this CTE, the devastating condition. So what is this? What's the biology underlying this? So, of course, we were concerned. Now with Scottish footballs, we ban from heading balls before and after matches. So we ban all contact sports. But it's also worrying to me. If we ban all sports, we know that inactivity is like the new smoking, right? So we need to do sports. Sport is good for everyone. If you take it too far, we will get other problems. So where's the balance here? How do we find the balance? I put a lot of research gaps in this area here, but there is a balance. Don't push it too far on one side. There's also a beneficial aspect of this. So the pro is sport is good for everyone and should be encouraged at all times. The con, well, sport-related concussion could be detrimental and must be prevented. Really personally, this is me many years ago playing football. This is me a few months ago playing football at the neurotrauma meeting in Cambridge. I think it's good to keep doing sports in your entire life. But how do we really optimize the brain health across the lifespan of athletes after concussion? And after all, many of them do have a lot of symptoms and a poor quality of life. How do we develop treatments for it? Huge knowledge gaps, huge opportunities. To be discussed today and also highlight a few meetings. We have our own Neurotrauma Summit meeting in November next year. This will be discussed. I'm one of the founders of European Neurotrauma Organization, part of the organizing list. And also the big neurosurgical meeting in Vienna. That was short. Okay, thank you. You need to upload.
Yeah, I uploaded. Maybe, can you help? Thanks.
Okay.
Make a mess. While we wait, what is the percentage of, if you were to say, that actually suffer from TBI?
You mean for those who have persistent post-concussion symptoms, the really chronic ones, it talked about 2 to 3% of all concussions. It's really difficult to find that number, actually. 10 to 15% have prolonged, but not all of them are chronic. So, but what we have looked at was the chronic ones.
I have it here.
She has it on.
I have it on mine because for some reason, yes, I have it here. Because for some reason it's not up here. I sent it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So the 2%, it's a lot because
there are
a lot of
yeah, exactly.
considering how many athletes we have.
But there's no link between these persistent symptoms and dementia as far as we know. But on the other hand, it's not been studied enough.
Yes.
You're also CTE skeptic.
I mean, the instruments are also not harmonized, right?
No, they're not.
So how do you assess the psychological difficulties or post-concussion syndrome? It's not really standard.
But for the females, before I start, it's because of the inflammation is much greater in females. You have a much greater response in the immune system. So
This one theory. The other one is the integral axonal differences in the microstructure of axons. So, and also one easy way is the relatively weak neck muscles. You get high rotation at basically the same impact. So the closer you get more rotation at time of concussion. But these are still theories, knowledge gaps. So.
Okay, thank you. So what I wanted to do is just to... Oh, the microphone, sorry. What I wanted to do is, again, in a few minutes, to... let's do this. No, it did. So, well, let's keep that. Yes, but it wasn't working. So I wanted to go to give you just a little glimpse of one thing that we have actually talked about in the panel discussion at the very beginning, which is prevention. And I think that one knowledge gap that we have, which is really important, is how to prevent, bad experiences or bad influences very early on during pregnancy. Now we know that, and this is something that could spare a lot of direct and indirect costs, of course, in mental health. What we are trying to study is basically the interaction, but also the shared environment, the shared mechanisms between very different conditions that a lot of scientists study separately, but actually have similar mechanisms. And what I'm talking about is, for example, prenatal stress, nourishment, bad nourishment, infections, or medications. All of these are going to affect the fetus when they are, of course, experienced during pregnancy. And this will have a lot of consequences that could be already manifested during fetal life, but could otherwise be manifested at childhood or in critical periods. For example, adolescence, which is a critical period for neurodevelopment, for development of the brain, where a second hit could come, hormones, a lot of traumatic experiences, the stress of just growing up, which might interact with earlier experience with stress, for example, and increase the likelihood that a mental disorder is actually manifests itself. Now, one of the most important things that we have tried to develop is this funnel effect model. So basically, the idea, we started studying, I've studied for most of my life stress as an important disruptor of brain development, but at some point of my life, I encountered maternal obesity. And this was just for serendipitous. So I was working with some colleagues who wrote this grant on maternal obesity. I've always been working on stress. And I stumbled into this phenomenon that when you try to model maternal obesity in an animal model, what you end up is with a stressed animal. So this all started a very long story that, however, is very important for us because we can use and leverage nutrition, so good nutrition, to actually act on the consequences of early life stress. And so now the knowledge gap really is about nutrition and the brain. So it's true that nutrition is very promising because it's very easy to, change a diet, very difficult to change a person and take it from a stressful environment to a non-stressful environment. But there are a lot of things that we don't know about how nutrients and diet and all of these things actually, interact with the developing fetus. And we had the EBRA cluster, brain food, together with a group of scientists, and we have been starting to really think what are the gaps which are needed to really, go deep into nutritional psychiatry. Well, first of all, we don't know much about which nutrients and which nutritional interventions really impact brain health. Now, we know that certain nutrients are good, but for example, let's take antioxidants. I guess everybody would say that antioxidants are good, but that's not exactly true because during development, especially during brain development, a certain degree of oxidative stress is actually needed for cells to survive and to, especially for metabolic function in cells. For example, insulin enters the cells only if there is a certain degree of oxidative stress. So if we remove oxidative stress with antioxidants, actually we're causing a damage. So you do see how the science of nutrition is really complex. Very promising, but very complex. And so the other thing, of course, is to understand which are the neuronal circuits, the cells and the molecules that ultimately we can leverage on to improve brain function and brain health. And clearly, it would be really important at this point to, on a population basis, to develop biomarkers that can tell us just by, for example, looking at the blood of a person to say, oh, well, your brain is not good because you're lacking this, or you have too much of this. So it's very nice and very promising, but it's extremely difficult to actually put into practice. And if you're interested in this topic, we have, as a group, the ECMP Nutrition Network that I'm chairing has just put out this review by X et al., where we are trying to bring out the question and trying to give some answers and some recommendations. And I'm done. I guess we just, yes.
Actually, can I have a first question? We heard the whole day, we heard about what we all think is the biggest important topic in brain health, and of course it's the one I study. So my question to you would be, if you inverse it, so what do you want from the funders? What kind of programs would you think would serve best brain health? I'm not talking about topical. I'm talking about what is the direction of the funding, what does it go to? Like consortia, platforms, individual projects?
Well, of course, to myself, first of all. Well, actually, I was very inspired by the discussion that there was right before when this 3% came out. So for some funding schemes, there is only a 3% success rate. No, I think it was or 7%, I would say more 7% than 3%. 3% is very, very low. But 7% success rate, I think it was very good what was said before, and that is that we are actually losing money. Because to have all these scientists to, put up projects, take months to write these proposals, and then find out that your proposal, of course, has not been successful because out of 300, only 4 or 5 have been funded. I think this is very inefficient, but it's not just inefficient. It's more than that. I think that through these funding schemes, we are actually leaving out those projects which are a little bit more risky, or because it's only really the mainstream that goes out. And I think this is a big gap right now in the funding.
Thanks. Referring to your question, how do my potential money that we get being spent the best way? In a way, I think consortia is the most important. But there's not one solution to these problems. There's a multidisciplinary in many ways. You need technology, you need, I have to say AI, but you need basic science, you need also sort of different groups that you're studying. But also thinking that if you get progress in one disorder of the brain, that can probably benefit others as well. But for my particular one that I mentioned now, I mean, the big risk of dementia is if you're a professional athlete. So why are not the big clubs spending money in this? They can spend more than $100 million to buy Kylian Mbappé to Real Madrid, but nothing to research. I think the 60 players in the UK now suing their football association because they got dementia or CTE. So, I mean, be proactive, help us help the players and the athletes. They have the money to it, and we have the resources and knowledge to do it. So.
Thank you for reintroducing your topic again. No, that's fine. So I think that to answer my own question, I think that the most important, for me, the most important thing would be also addressing your point that we have a clarity what is the direction of the funding. So most of the times I think there's a little bit too much asked of the framework. So we need to address policy, we need to address patient side, we need to address teaching, we need to address this, we need to address this, and diversity, inclusion, and so. So there's a lot that we have to, like a lot of boxes that we have to tick, and this can, I think, dilute in the end what is the impact of the research. So I think it could be like consortia. I agree that consortia are really important. I also think that platforms that are maybe interdisciplinary platforms would be really important on the European level, and I'm involved with Brain Canada, where platforms are a huge part of the funding for Canadian research, and I applaud them for doing that, because I think that is a very open call, basically, where there's nothing else, just be a platform, and then you can figure out what is needed. So I think it's that this kind of topical programs, I think I would move away from that and let's figure out the researchers and the consortia what they think is important, and then agree on. Of course, the panel should then agree on where the money is going to.
Yeah, actually, I just had you made me think of a funding scheme that, for example, is true for mental health, the joint actions. And at the beginning, I didn't understand the importance of these joint actions. So basically, they are big actions where 20, 30 countries, I'm sure you're aware of them, 30 countries come together, and it's not on a competitive basis, but there is a clear indication of what the research should be. I mean, it's not really research, it's more towards policy. But I'm thinking now, talking with you, that this would be an in-between, our classical, let's say, horizon calls and a joint action would actually, serve some purpose, which is to give a little bit more space and freedom to the researchers so that they know that they're going to get funding. It's not going to be maybe huge, but then overall the consortium is still, could still have a lot of money altogether. And it would allow for some more, let's say, plasticity in what, things could be done. I think this is something that, it should be thought about. I'm sure that someone has been thinking about this. But it's a little bit less, it removes a lot of the stress of, having then to meet all those boxes and tick all those boxes, which ultimately it limits a lot what you can actually put in a project.
For a time, we also needed to tick the box of creating jobs in Europe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was part of the proposal. So get rid of that, please. So and I would add maybe to that I think the turnaround times are too long, because if you wait and you're part of the 95% that doesn't get the grant, if it's not too much work, and if you don't wait too long, then it's more appropriate, I think.
And beside the topic, but if the way it is now, if you're going to apply for an EU grant, there's many weeks of full-time job work with 5% possibility to winning, and just getting the administrative load, if you actually get it, is also almost exhaustive. Myself, many times I said, it's not really worth it. So all this administration and regulations and all these issues really prevent good research in Europe. I would say something needs to be done about it, as I think it's a key issue. And for all this, data sharing, I like the platform ideas, but also send patients. It's difficult to get patients from other parts of Sweden into my department. To send patients elsewhere, or athletes for that matter, is also difficult in a way. But for big, really expensive, single-cell transcriptomics on tissue, that can be centralized to somewhere and perhaps save a lot of money. It's not really needed that we all have that expertise, maybe. So and sharing is believing, sharing is winning, I guess. So. Yeah, now we're discussing, but.
I hear your thoughts about, having more plasticity, flexibility, and maybe moving away from topic-based goals. But then I have a very simple question. I'm a funder. So how do we evaluate the projects, and how do we decide who to give it to? Because all the boxes that you need to tick is for the evaluation, really. So it's an open question.
So thank you for this, and I would like to take this opportunity to address this, because I'm involved with Brain Canada. As I said, I'm also involved with Lundbeck Foundation, which provides, I think it is something like 60 million euros per year for only Denmark. So it's a lot of money. And so what both of them have in common is that they have standing committees. So they appoint committees. Of course, you have conflicts of interest statements that you can apply for each individual proposal, but you already have the group. You already have the people who will decide, right? So you don't have to wait until all the proposals are in and then send out invitations. And so you can clearly schedule the appointment when everybody is coming together. And I don't think it's necessary, if two reviewers disagree, to send out to a third reviewer. I think it can be discussed in a panel meeting, right? And then in the end, you have to find an agreement as a group, you know, how this is ranked. And I think this is much more effective than this kind of by mail sending out another review. So I think it can be shortened, and I think a benchmarking would really be nice to see. So if we talk to funders, they always explain us how difficult it is, and I appreciate how difficult it is, but I don't see any kind of movement towards really looking around for inspiration and for benchmarks in this regard.
I kind of like this idea of the standing committees also, and I talking to the funders here. I do a lot of review also for the European community, for many funders. And what I noticed over the years, because I've started reviewing about 15 years ago, and over the years, what I'm seeing is that the reviewers and the reviews are going down in terms of quality. There are a lot of reviewers that are not knowledgeable or don't have the time or whatever. But I see things that I would not like to see. And so the standing committee is a very good idea because you select them based on, their expertise, whatever. You pay them because, of course, you pay them. But you have an internal quality check and quality control, which is being around a table and having at least 2 people or 3, looking more closely to a proposal. And I think we have to go back to that system because right now this system, I'm talking about many, the Marie Curie, the whatever, the DN, they all have a lot of not high quality reviews. And this is a pity because especially if I'm spending all that time to write, and then I get a reviewer which doesn't even know what it's writing on his review, then that's really discouraging.
I've been also in these types of panel when we were 6 or 7 reviewers, but always someone with the competence for that particular application. I've been on reviews where it was like ophthalmology or ear, nose, and throat disorders, but I can evaluate them scientifically, but the specific knowledge was always someone in the committee. And we were being paid, not a lot, but at least something. I think we're all a bit tired of doing all this extra work for nothing, weekends, vacations, nights. So, it just gives some sort of incentive to actually do the thorough work. And also, as you said, internal control. So someone can see very easily this was rather sloppy. It was not really carefully read or evaluated. So then you're basically not invited back. So the incentive for reviewers as well. So you spend a lot of money on the ground, but you spend some more money on the reviewers and make them actually work for the money.
Maybe I would also comment on this issue that the quality of data and the quality of reviews are going not into the right direction now, not only in brain science, but in the science as a whole. And this have a negative impact on the efficiency of our research, of our all research communities. So maybe it's a question how to change these tendencies because these are obviously there with the generation, the increasing amount of data, and there is not enough attention to the details at every level. So maybe to change the whole funding schemes in a direction that to control not the input, but the output of the results that you generated. That's just an idea, because there were so many initiatives to support brain research, Decade of the Brain, European, different initiatives. And although we have very nice results, but we are still ahead of many breakthroughs. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that comment, also reflecting this kind of quality issue. And maybe one more thought that that I can maybe bring to this table, also with respect to where this money should be dedicated to. We mentioned platforms and consortia, but you also mentioned that the projects are kind of have to be de-risked to be successful. And I think that for some projects that I think it makes sense, like for consortia where it's more about cohesion, but for really innovative projects that can't be done or shouldn't be done. So maybe a solution would be also to earmark some of the money for these kind of more experimental, more out-of-the-box projects. I know this is risky, or not risky, this is difficult to do, but again, not to make too much PR work for Lundbeck, but the Lundbeck Foundation has this kind of program where it's about experiments. So actually, we as a referee, you are told that one measure of quality of this proposal is that it's not fundable by regular standards of funding agencies, because it's too risky.
Yes. Well, but we have that, right, in many calls, high risk, high gain, also the ERC, the ERC funding scheme should be not like that. But then ultimately it's not, because, it is expected that you will deliver, and the high risk, high gain is, I may not deliver. And this is not in the calls that we get.
Okay, maybe we can take a... No, but I totally agree with that. To really get the big breakthroughs, you need some devoted money for that. Well, if I review that and this is not feasible, your feasibility gets low, and then potentially good projects will be discarded. So I totally agree on that a risky project could be awarded if they seem reasonable, but it's also difficult to assess. It has to be a lot of money. No, exactly. It's a pile of it, yeah, but you generate pile of data, yeah, so, yeah, exactly.
No, I just wanted to follow up on what you said about the outcome. And really, outcome can also be some negative results. It's as valuable, and to share that, and to avoid duplication on a pathway we shouldn't, pursue, is definitely also what we need in terms of being, prioritized and target the right goals, I think. And I've been closely witnessing a couple of EU-funded projects where the outcomes are just so disappointing in terms of not deliverables. Not that they are negative, but they are just not delivered. And I think to have some more focus on that, and the translational aspects of whatever the research is, could really benefit instead of having these extremely workload on the application process.
Can I add something to so I think that there is really no bad result. If you choose the right methodology, whatever you get is good. Yeah. It may not go in the direction you wanted to, but it's good. It's good data. It's just not what you expected. And I think this is a cultural thing that we have to probably enforce a little bit more, no? And which is the publication bias that we see. We only see positive results. We only see the results that everybody expects. And many important negative results are just not published because this is not what you expect. But then there is where the real data are, when you don't expect something, and then you have to read through the data and understand what's beyond that. And this is the whole data that I showed you on the metabolic stress and so on. That was a bad experiment. It didn't work. And instead of throwing it, I said, this is really strange. There is something that, you know, I'm missing here. It's not coming the way I wanted. And this all led to 10 years of research because, you know, I insisted in something that looked negative, but instead it was telling us something that we were not expecting. And this has a lot to do with how we also train the new generations in looking at, you know, looking at the data. Don't always expect don't always, you know, look for what you are searching for. You have to be, you know, in a way open towards what you have there. And this is something that not many young people do, also because they, you know, they want to publish nice data and they want to have nice publications. But the whole system is pushing towards a certain performance, and that is not good for science.
It's a super quick comment. I understand this with the breakthrough and the really risky project. I hear from colleagues in the US that it seems there that funders are actually looking more towards treatment, effective treatment. They're a bit tired of fancy mechanisms, but you know, it's going to work. It's going to help my relative with their symptoms or their disorder. So there are both ways to this coin, you know, I guess, both really practical and hands-on effective treatments right now, but also novel mechanism that can deliver breakthroughs in the near future. So it's for founders, it's not easy. What side are you going to take?
Yeah, so I wanted to just reflect on what we're just talking about, because I think, you know, in Coltex in general, we're pushing for, you know, fair data and pushing people to put their data in databases and everything and use European infrastructures. But we can only encourage them to do so at this point. And so from what I'm listening to right now, like my question is, as funders, should we be more stringent? Should we push scientists to do more, for example, to commit to publishing negative data if, you know, their hypothesis turns out not to be correct? And, you know, at least deposit it, even if it's, you know, bioarchives or whatever, but at least that there is a trace, so that if somebody has the same idea and wants to do it, they have a sense that it's not going to work and we're not wasting our time, things like that.
Yeah, basically I agree with you. If someone applies for money and you give them money to do this particular experiment, if the results are negative, you should know about that, and the research community should know about that. But it's also the journals are not so keen on publishing negative results, so it works both ways. But there are, as you say, bioarchives. There are other means of publishing these days.
I would go exactly like for clinical trials. I mean, in clinical trials, if the clinical trial is not, if the drug is not working, we have to know. And it's the same thing with basic research. And again, it's a culture. If the funders are, you know, willing to accept negative data, then everybody will, you know, share the negative data. So it might be actually a very good idea to enforce a little bit more this.
Maybe a comment on the questions. I think we know for long now that the major gap is the lack of reproducibility of most of the data which are produced. And this has really, really prevented brain research to deliver. And as you said, Professor Van Eimeren before, we need, I think the funders needs to put the most attention to this, because this is how we can try to break the circle. Because right now, as you said, you know, whether it is panels or individual evaluators, they are still relying on the same criteria, which are you publishing in Nature, Science, and that's it. And so you have this always vicious circle between these evaluation criteria based on only competitive science, doing only the same kind of science, and this lack of reproduction in data. So we need to break this circle at some point, and indeed, as you said, I think the funders should put really a lot of effort in funding, you know, the way data are presented, and also associate maybe more the society to this, because, you know, at some point the money comes from the government, from the citizens, and we have also to clearly associate. I think the notion of expert patients should be extended to expert evaluators, maybe in the society also. This would be something that we should think about?
Just one maybe a slight word of caution with regard, I mean, I agree with everything you say, with also particularly the idea to have kind of this reporting duty. What happened, you propose to collect some data, now show us if you collected the data, and also report what happened to your hypothesis. So, but one step further would be open science. So, and there I think there is some idea among funders to multiply the effect of these research proposals by advocating, or at least advocating, but what maybe even forcing the researchers to put the data out. And I think all the researchers agree that in general open science is a great idea. But if you would ask me if I would apply for the projects that I have now applied for in creating the data with all the patients and putting in all the effort and then sharing it instantly, I would say no, I won't do that. So and people will move out of that, and the best qualified people will move out of that. I think there can be an embargo period that can be negotiated for this. And in the end, I think the most crucial aspect is the FAIR principle. So you have to be clear that there is data and what kind of data you have. You don't have to share all the data. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, in a way, we already are enforcing. It's finished. Okay. Well, anyway, I was going to say that we are already using, already open science is already there, because when we do meta-analysis and systematic reviews, that's already, we're already doing that. We're not doing it, we could do it much better, but in a way we're doing it. Sorry, was there a last question? Or, no, they want us to close. Sorry. Thank you very much for the discussion.